Mario Martinez. Welcome to the RevAmp podcast show. We are extremely happy to have you on board and have you as a guest interviewee today. So for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you already, please just introduce yourself, perhaps your role, a little bit about your company, and what we'll be discussing today.
Gideon, I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you so much, my friend, for having me on that. Love what you guys are doing over there at DealHub. So I'm excited. And usually I'm the one interviewing because I've got the Modern Selling podcast. And so now it's the role is reversed. So I love being the guest. Any case, you asked me, what was the question again?
Yeah. So apart from you, what's your company and a little bit about what you guys are doing?
So Vingresso actually is, I'm the CEO and founder of Vingresso. We formed the company a little over 3.5 years ago, and it was a 4-way company merger I did with my co-founders, Vivica Von Rosen, Bernie Borges, and Kurt Shaver. And we brought together multiple organizations to really solve one major problem in the industry, and that was teaching B2B sales reps how to actually leverage digital, like social media or video, to be able to engage with today's modern buyer. We made a prediction, Gideon, and man, if I would have put some money on it, I'd probably be a rich person. But we made a prediction that 3.5 years ago, it'd be a 5-year-long transformation. The world would go virtual. There would be no longer, things of the past would be things like in-person sales training, 2-day boot camps, 1-week-long trainings. They would be completely a thing of the past. Unfortunately, because of the global pandemic, it happened 3.5 years into our 5-year-long prediction. So it actually came true. So that's good. But collectively as a whole, Vingresso has educated more than 140,000 professionals, from the individual entrepreneur up through large corporate enterprises like Juniper Networks or even Zoom. Zoom is one of our clients as well, in terms of teaching sellers how to actually create these conversations, more sales meetings, more sales conversations online and through tools like video, as an example. So excited about our future and what's to come, especially now in this era. Every buyer and seller are completely aligned in the way we engage. And that's the first time I could ever think of where buyer and seller engagement are 100% totally aligned. Every buyer, every seller are digitally connected, socially engaged, mobile attached, and video hungry. Yet, many sellers have a difficult time right now in being able to achieve quota, and many organizations are suffering as well for various different reasons, including, unfortunately, the pandemic that hit the world, but many other reasons as well. And so that's what we do, and that's what our focus is all about.
So fantastic. Thanks for the lead in there. I wonder, in relation to today's topic title, how that relates to, and I can see that it does, into the need for these proactive, innovative, forward-thinking sales organizations to better understand the ROI that they are receiving and achieving from the many different sales tools that they're acquiring to solve the problems that you've just listed. Because everybody wants to be better connected, they are, of course, finding new technologies to help them do so. It is a minefield. Sometimes you don't always have the luxury of time to make those decisions in situations like this pandemic. And I think the experience that you bring to this conversation in helping to understand the ROI would be really powerful and important. So yeah, with that subject, where does one start? Imagine that you're speaking to a sales operations, revenue operations professional who's responsible for making those kind of decisions day in and day out. What's the framework for starting to understand that?
So a couple of things that I'll talk about here, and one of my favorite topics is talking about sales tools. So my history is, before I started Vingresso, I spent 18 years in corporate. My last spot was a VP of sales, where I launched a digital selling program. And in that digital selling program, we were really challenged with, in that organization, we were really challenged with how to actually create more sales conversations that led to closed opportunities. And there were several problems inside there. And so I'm going to simplify this for our RevOps leaders and our sales ops and sales leaders are listening in. But the problem was, we were using old methodologies of prospecting. Our senior leadership team, this was, by the way, 4 years ago, wanted us knocking on business parks to go door to door to be able to try to find companies that wanted to buy our product and technology. Now, this company was not a small flyby. It was a very well-known player in the software collaboration space. But the problem is we were cold calling, and when we didn't make quota, we were cold calling more. And when we didn't make quota, we added on another prospecting day in the field and also in person. And I just said, guys, we're in the 21st century. Hello, hold on a second. We've got to change the way we're actually going to market. And I met with a lot of resistance inside the organization because nobody thought that our buyers were digitally engaged, so socially connected, mobile attached, and video hungry. And all we kept doing was throwing more and more tools. We just kept buying tools and throwing at the sales organization. We would take a methodology and we throw it at the sales organization. We were like, something's got to stick. And that's what we were just doing. We're tools and technology, throwing it at the sales force, training them up on it or attempting to train, and hoping that we would expect different results. And all we were doing in that training was teaching our sellers how to go about clicking, where to click, how to click. That's not training. That's called product training. That is not called skills training that actually enhances and changes behavior. Mm-hmm. So one day I went to our senior vice president of sales operations and I said, hey man, we're spending about $1 million a year on sales tools and technologies. Mm-hmm. So could you do me a favor? I want to know, of all the sales tools that we're spending money on, I want to know exactly how much in terms of revenue, open opportunities, close won, close loss, that we can attribute to each one of these tools, so we can identify, well, what tools are being used in the field that are the best performing ones that are producing the most amount of opportunity. Because if I can then look at my sales force and say, all right, my top 20% are all using this tool, this tool, this tool, this tool, but my bottom 80% are all not using any of these tools. Well, right. I know what I now need to do to be able to make them successful.
Okay.
So when I had this meeting, my senior vice president of sales operations, he says, there's no way for us to tell you that. I said, what do you mean there's no way for us to tell you that? Well, we have the vendors and they tell us, how something contributed, that they're trying to tie into our CRM, but we don't have a real easy way to be able to tell us that. And of course we do these QBRs with the vendors and they're telling us that they contributed, $10 billion to the sales pipeline. And I'm like, I don't care about the crap. What I care about is, what do our salespeople say? I don't care what the vendor says, because the vendor's going to tell you whatever the vendor's going to tell you. Tell me what our salespeople say. Mm-hmm. We couldn't get that. So I said, so you mean to tell me that we have purchased $1 million worth of tools and technology, and we can't attribute not one single dollar? Well, the sales team says they can't live without, and they rattle off a bunch of tools. It was then Zoom Info, but now Discover.org as an example. And we also had Data.com, which has now been sunset by Salesforce. And I said, oh my God, we're spending $250,000 a year on Data.com alone. Mm-hmm. We don't know how many records that we can attribute to sales opportunities. No. All right. So I said, well, let's come up with an idea. And he said, well, I'm all ears. So I went back and I said, man, if there was a way that I could have my sellers tell me what tools they were using at the beginning when they open an opportunity to help them open it, and then at the end on what tools they use throughout the sales the sales cycle, man, that would be pretty sexy. So I came up with this idea and I said, what if we put 2 brand new fields inside of Salesforce, of which we now in our company have replicated inside of HubSpot, our CRM. What if we put 2 new required fields that said, which tools did you use to help you open this opportunity? And a sales rep has to go and select it. LinkedIn, Zoom Info, OneMob, Seamless.ai, DealHub, whatever it might be, right? All these tools inside of there. And what if we asked the same exact question, slight tweak at the end, which was when they go to close an opportunity, close won, close loss, and it said, which tools did you use to help you close this opportunity? Mm-hmm. And it's the same exact set of tools. And they said, oh, we can't make that a required field. We have too many required fields. I said, whoa. Wait, you can't make it a required field? No, we can't make it a required field. I said, whoa, we're spending all this money, and you're telling me that you have no way to do revenue attribution to these individual tools, and now you're saying we can't change this? Who owns the sales, the sales CRM? Mm-hmm. You or sales? Well, sales does. Who pays the bill? sales. Well, this is not going to happen without executive vice president of worldwide sales and marketing approval. So I said, all right, I'll get you your approval. I call up my boss. I say, hey, boss, do you know how much you were spending for sales tools and technologies? He says, all right, I don't know what's on the line. $1 million. $1 million? Oh, my God. I said, did you know that we can't attribute not one sales opportunity to the open pipeline, close won, close lost, to a tool or technology that we purchased? $1 million. What? Yeah, that's right. We're wasting $1 million. No, we can't be wasting $1 million. There must be some value. Yeah, I would agree with you. There's some value. The question is what value? For example, boss, did you know that we're spending $250,000 on data.com, or we're only spending this much on Zoom Info, now discover.org? What? Wait, aren't they the same tool? Yes, they're the same tool. Why do we have both of them? I don't know. Well, which one does the Salesforce use? I don't know. That's why I want to implement this. What? We don't have that tracking yet? No, we don't have that tracking. And apparently I need your approval to get it done. He said, approved. 5-minute long conversation.
Yep.
I go back to our SVP of sales operations, and they're like, well, this is going to be an act of God, because now we got to get the salespeople to be able to put this in, and it's going to be a new required field. We're going to have a lot of grumblings. And I said, you don't tell the salespeople what to do. We do. And we're going to tell them, number one, it's required. And number two, congratulations. You have just been empowered to tell us as a senior leadership team what tools you're using in the field, and whatever tools you're not, we cut it and we reinvest in the tools that you've been asking for.
Right.
So, simple problem to solve. And this is all part of now my digital selling training program that I'm trying to incorporate, because we were looking at launching LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And that particular company I was working for, we were actually getting ready to launch the 5th video sales acceleration product out there on the market. So there was like the Vidyards of the world, the Videolicious, the Bomb Bombs. We were the 5th one, and I was part of the product launch team that was taking this to market. And so I said, this would be fantastic if we can put this in place so that when we launch our digital sales training program, now we can attract the tools that they're using to open an opportunity and the tools they're using to help them throughout and to close an opportunity. And it was amazing insight, Gideon. Amazing insight. You want to know what happened?
Yes, absolutely.
So, as I told you earlier, we were spending $250,000 on data.com. And we were spending a small fraction of that with discover.org for a different, another portion of the sales organization. So here's what we did. We launched our LinkedIn training program. Now, with the LinkedIn training program, we were right at the beginning of that program, about 45 days into it, and I stopped the whole program because LinkedIn didn't know what the crap they were doing in terms of how to train a sales force on skills. What they were teaching was, what I talked about earlier, is where to click, how to click, and what to click. Right. Well, that's not sales training, right? That's product training. Sales training is the art and the skill of being able to understand how to create that engagement with our buyer. But I couldn't really attach sales training to the CRM, but what I could attach is this tool. If I taught you how to use the tool correctly, with the right skill development, would it help with opening more opportunities or closing more opportunities, or both? And so that's what we started doing. Was we said, all right, inside of here, any of the sales training or methodologies that are tied to tools and technologies, we're going to list the technology, because that's really what they're using. And then they've got the skill and the behavior behind that. So here's what happened. In the first 3 months out of the gate, something happened. Very crazy. It was crazy. It was interesting. We had about $1.2 million of open opportunity pipeline attributed to LinkedIn. Okay. We had about, I think it was almost $2 million, maybe $3 million attributed to Zoom Info, aka discover.org. Guess how much we had an opportunity, ACV, annual contract value, how much we had attributed in 3 months to data.com.
I'm guessing the way the story going, I'm guessing it's close to a flat line.
Zero. Right. Zero. Fast forward now, 6 months. We had $4 million attributed to the LinkedIn training program that I had launched. which, by the way, is what brought me to my own company, Vengresso. I took that IP and I created my own company out of it. And now we teach everybody how to do the same exact thing. So that's what we do there.
Okay.
So 6 months later, we look at LinkedIn. It's about $4 million for LinkedIn and about $4.5 million for ZoomInfo. 6 months later with data.com, $1,100 in ACV.
Mm-hmm.
$1,100. What was clear was that the sales reps were not being able to use it to attribute sales pipeline. Now, we went back and we surveyed the team and said, is this right? Are you sure? And everybody said the data in data.com then sucked. It was horrible. They couldn't get it to work. It was wrong data. So they stopped using it. And what happened is Tommy and Billy and Mary and Susie all found out that it was bad. So they told Bobby, Billy, and John and Mark. And then those people told, the other Marys and the other Susies, and, right? And all of a sudden it spread like wildfires that this particular product was of no value. But we were spending $250,000 a year, year over year for like 5 years straight. Oh my God. So we're no longer using this tool. And within 6 months, we had $1,100 attributed in ACV. So I picked up the phone and I called my EVP of worldwide sales and marketing. And I called him up and I said, hey, would you like to save $250,000 and reinvest it into tools and technology that will help us better perform? He was like, I'm all ears. What do we do? And I said, turn off data.com. Turn off data.com. We've been using that for, here's what the data shows. All we had to do was ask our sellers, what tools and technologies were you using at the beginning of the sales process,
Mm-hmm.
and were you using throughout the sales process in the middle? And what that showed us was some amazing details, which was, our top performers, when trained correctly, utilize LinkedIn and ZoomInfo as tools to help them open an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout the sales process, they were using video sales acceleration. They were using this, they were using that, they were using this. And what we were able to see is whoa, now we saw a trend. Top performers did this, bottom performers did that. And we were able to say, if you want to be able to create more sales conversations, then here's what we need to do. And we started investing back into the training and skill set on these particular tools, and not just the how to use, as an example, discover.org and where to find a phone number,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was table stakes. But what do you say now once you've got that phone number, once you got the person on the line, right? What message do you create when you're sending out a LinkedIn message? So we really started honing in on, we understand what the top tools are. Once we understood that, now we can hone in on skills development, because I have a saying, Gideon, and that is, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So go ahead.
No, I've heard a similar phrase back in the UK, but I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. But I like yours nonetheless.
A fool with the tool is still a fool, baby. And so we gotta make sure that our sales organizations weren't a bunch of fools with tools, and they were doing all the wrong things. And it's kind of basic 101. If you go back to everybody who's 45 and older, we grew up when we learned sales. We were sitting inside the cubes next to we were in training for whatever it was, a couple weeks to a month. And we would sit next to the person on the phones. We'd plug in our little Y connector. We'd listen to their phone conversations. And they would only put us with the top performing best reps. Why? Because they wanted to mirror that behavior, right?
Right.
So we learned how to do cold calling with training, and we spent usually 4 weeks at it. And we continue to get training on this week over week, or month over month, or year over year. The sales organization would roll out sales training to us. And it could be related to, how to open more conversations, how to have the phone conversation, relationship building, how to close, how to negotiate, all those elements.
Mm-hmm.
Yet here we were giving new technologies, digital technologies like video, like LinkedIn. And we were saying, hey, go be successful, go sell. But it was a different methodology to be able to engage with the buyer on a social or digital network, or a different methodology to develop someone's skill so they can actually deliver a powerful video message that would attract their target buyer. Example, we have a lot of reps who are out there using video because they're trying to differentiate themselves, right? But did you know that you only have 7 to 15 seconds to bring that buyer in, to get them to watch the rest of that 1 minute long video? If you screw it up in those 7 to 15 seconds, you're hosed. and the video was completely ineffective, and the 30 minutes that your rep spent on trying to really create that personalized video was a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is you bought this tool and technology, you roll it out to the sales organization, and they start using it, and within 60 days, that's the time frame for sellers. You've got their attention for 60 days. Within 60 days, they see no results. They stop using it. You just wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars in tools and technology for your sales team. So we were really able to see what were the best tools to utilize in opening and closing, and we were also to create correlation and causation, if you would, on all the way through. Those that were the super top performers use these tools all the time throughout the entire sales cycle.
So my question to that is, everything you're saying completely makes sense. Many companies now and many sales revenue operations professionals out there will still be in companies that are perhaps resistant to change, that are perhaps entrenched with favorite tools or brand favorite tools rather than things that truly make the most impact. For those that are in that situation and maybe don't have the data up front, but need to know how to take that conversation to the C-level and to the decision makers, is there any additional advice that you would bring to them as to how to be agents of change?
Yes. Do exactly as I did. You ask the question, how much are we spending on tools and technologies today? For sales, by the way.
Yep.
You get your answer and you say, oh my God, $10 million or $1 million or $500,000, whatever the number is, doesn't matter, whatever that number is. And then you say, which tools and technologies are attributed to the open pipeline and or the close won, close lost? And everybody says, well, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Wait, so we actually are spending X hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars per year, and you're saying we can't attribute ROI? Correct. So we have sales tools with no ability to attract ROI. Well, the sales force says they're super important. We know they're super important, and we have to have these types of tools. Well, hold on a second. So you're telling me that we have no ability to track the ROI. Then you turn around and you say, boss, if I told you that you were burning through, and let's just use the number, $1 million a year on sales tools, but you didn't know which tools were the best tools for sales reps to leverage to close more deals, would you be pissed off? And your boss is going to say, yeah, we should be able to tell that. Did you know that we can't? Now, we've worked from the largest of large Fortune 100s all the way down to the super small sales organizations that have 15 people.
Right.
And not one of our companies, from the huge major brands, not one of our customers has ever been able to say we can attribute back to ROI of sales tools until we take them through our training program, which is tied to modern sales mastery around social, which is the use of LinkedIn as an example, around video using tools like OneMob or BombBomb or Videolicious or Hippo Video, whatever it might be. And we implement these two changes in the program. As soon as we do that, a great example is one of our customers, literally within 9 days of turning on this new tracking feature and rolling it out to the sales organizations and telling them that they are now empowered to help transform their future. In the 9 days, the sales reps immediately started showcasing what tools they were using. And which tools were at the top? In this case, with one of our customers, one of the top tools was the digital sales prospecting tools. And what they realized is, oh my gosh, our sellers, we had over $100,000 in 9 days attributed to digital sales prospecting tools because the sales reps globally, it's a 900-person sales organization, by the way, and the sales organization, all they're focused on right now is prospecting. So it gave really great insights into, wait, what is the sales organization focused on right now? And how do we move these things through the sales process? It's some great insights. So that having been said, in answer to your question is you ask those questions that I just asked, and then you let that march right up the flagpole. Keep saying, did you know that we're spending, again, example, $1 million a year, but we can't actually attribute to open pipeline?
I totally get it. And Mario, the question that I want to ask, and my closing question here is, what was the impact on your career of being brave enough to ask that question? You had
So
you were at a fork in the roads where you could quite easily have not asked the question and continued with the status quo, right? That's the other option that was on the table for you, but you chose to ask the question, knowing that there is implications of doing that. What impact did that personally have on your professional career?
So that's a really great question. For me, it had I mean, it was a road that I did not expect to happen. Let me explain. So as a result of figuring out the tools and technologies, as I heard you heard me mention, I actually launched a digital sales training program, which included both social and video to our sales organization. And we were able to directly attribute ROI. Why? Because I had to go justify a $200,000 expense on sales tools and technology. And so my
Right.
EVP said, "Hey, you better make sure that you can justify an ROI for this, right? If we're gonna give you $200,000 for a global sales force of 350 folks, you need to make sure that you can justify it." And that's how it all came about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening was, as of today, in 2020. Uh, it was LinkedIn's most successful enterprise deployment they had ever had in their enterprise history, because we were able to drive 100% rep adoption
Mm-hmm.
of in this case, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and 100% of the reps were able to attribute one sales opportunity to the open pipeline, close one, close lost. It had never been done before, and it still has not been done again. And so they asked me to speak at their annual users conference in October of 2015. And Gideon, if brand equity was a straight line like this going into one of the world's largest social media annual users conferences, it did like that.
Right.
And I spoke for 48 minutes on stage, solo, in front of thousands of their customers. The message reached, and within 1 hour of speaking, and going through this whole entire program, what we did and how we launched the program and how we tracked the ROI, I received an email from a Fortune, at that time 84, CEO,
Mm-hmm.
who invited me to come in and meet with his team on how to go about launching a digital sales training program and tracking the ROI of this. And 3 months later, I was literally out on my own, and I haven't looked back since. So that was January of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And a year later after that, I formed the world's largest modern sales training company. And within literally 9 months of, almost 12 months within that event. Now, yeah, 9 months. 9 months of that event, I became one of the top sales thought leaders and influencers in the marketplace. And that was all as a direct result of taking that leap and saying, guys, we got to think differently about how we're going about managing our business and also getting our sales reps to be able to prospect.
What's lovely about that story was that, although it was kind of groundbreaking, it wasn't particularly difficult to achieve. There was the resistance mostly in the mindsets and in the aptitude, but not necessarily in the capabilities to execute on that. Mario, we really want to thank you for sharing this wealth of experience, and of course, we'll make sure that we connect to you in the text below this podcast, so people can follow up and reach out to you directly if they have more
Yeah,
questions.
absolutely. And one thing I was going to say, Gideon, we actually have this whole entire system and what you need to do, including little nice pretty screenshots on how to actually go about building this out, how to build the use case. It's a long, about 18-minute long blog read.
Okay.
But I basically, about 3 months ago, we were being asked so much by our customers to document this. I finally documented it all and gave the secret sauce of what we use. So I think we'll link that back in the show notes, but it's our blog article. If you go to our Vengresso.com, it's how to calculate the ROI of your sales tools. So hopefully we'll be able to backlink that into the show notes.
Absolutely, we'll definitely link that. And then Mario, slightly to the side of the professional, I asked you and gave you fair warning. We wanted to know you on a personal level. Aside from your social media presence, what is it that people should remember about you that's not there already in the public domain? What is that unique Mario insight that you're willing to share with me today? I know you have one.
Well, so I guess there's one thing I will share is I came from a poor Mexican family, and I was the first in my family to go to college. And most people don't know this about me, but I was, when I was applying for colleges, my family did not have enough money to help me apply for colleges. Then it was $40 per application for a UC, like a University of California college, and it was like $60 for a private college, like a Stanford or whatever it may be. Private colleges were like $60 an application, and I had $41 total. So I had a dream, and that dream was to go to UC Berkeley to be a bear. And I took $40 out of $41 that we had total, and I applied to UC Berkeley, and I got in. And it was one college, one shot. If I didn't make it, I was going to become a massage therapist. That was my direction and my path.
Right.
So I guess most people don't know that about me in regards to our background and where I came from. My family didn't have enough money, but I remember writing the check for $40 out of $41 that I had in my checking account.
Fantastic. I love everything that says about your journey to be where you are today. I expect profoundly that you know the value of every step along the way, that nothing is trivial to you. And as much as you're in a great place of success today, you know what it means to get to this place for not only yourself, but everybody that is in that similar kind of growth curve, career curve, and somewhere on their journey, and can probably empathize a lot to that. And I'm sure those human skills also tie back really well in a career which lends itself to training and people and empathy and understanding. So I'm sure that's a huge advantage. Mario.
I'd like to think so.
Mario, thank you so much. We really appreciated having you on the podcast. Look forward to sharing this with the audience, and you being available to answer any further questions that people might have for you directly.
Absolutely. Gideon, thank you for having me. I love what you guys are doing over there at DealHub. So keep up the great work, and appreciate you including me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Take care, Mario. Thank you so much.